So this video is going to be a little bit different from what we've been talking about on the channel, which has mainly been about mindfulness exercises, deep and unconscious shadow work, as well as some more general mindset shifts and mindset principles. What this video is going to be talking about is how to become grounded in your own validation and your own experience of life. And what in real terms, what that means is how to become your own emotional anchor, your own emotional rock. So you're no longer pushing out here and trying to see what other people are thinking of you to use that as a sounding board in order to see where you are in life and if you're doing the right thing, but rather you can be that for yourself. And it's actually the end goal of all of this work that I am teaching you and all the work that I'm teaching my one-on-one clients too. However, it doesn't get talked about that much because it's kind of hard to put into work. So in this video, there's going to be 3 different sections I'm going to talk about. It's going to give you the big picture overview as well as some really big specific and practical advice that you can use about how to use all of the content that I'm giving you and all the playlists that I'm giving you in this channel, and how we don't just want to affect our internal world, but how that actually looks on the external and what you can do to kind of speed a few things up and make certain changes in the external world more easy. Because most people, when they come into shadow work, when they come into mindfulness, they're not just doing it for the practice. They're not just big, nerds like I am, or maybe my mentors and my friends. They want it because they want a practical shift in their external experience. I know I was when I first started that. I wanted to get into this stuff so I could be more confident in myself and with other people, be more social so I wouldn't judge myself, and I would be able to actually express myself in the way that I wanted to and in the way that it was happening up here, as well as also just live life more effortlessly, be able to make decisions, important decisions that were much more aligned to me, not wanting to have judgment placed on me. And if judgment was placed on me, that wouldn't actually bother me. I wanted that. I wanted to actually have the freedom to do what I wanted in my life. Whereas maybe I would have been scared if I'd have picked a certain option, or I would have thought that this wouldn't have been approved, or maybe not even that it wouldn't be approved. But I might not even allow myself to do that because it didn't fit the internal image of what I had for myself. So these are more practical ways that people want to get into this stuff. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Aaron. I run this show, Unconscious Flow, or rather this YouTube channel, Unconscious Flow, which is about using the conscious mind in the best way possible, having the right frameworks, as well as healing the unconscious mind and having that on our own side so we become much, much more in power, in control of our own life. So part 1, what we're going to be doing is something called a state cultivation practice. It gets a bunch of other things going for it as well. Like you develop mindfulness. All mindfulness is seeing how your mind's attention moves and also not being defined by your mind, not being thinking that your mind is, this is me, this is mine, this is myself. And you can actually create some distance between you and your thoughts as well as your emotions. It teaches you that. But the main way we're going to be using this practice that I'm about to give you is to develop a state which is kind of like our home base. And what I mean by home base is when we're in a stressful situation, it's a place that we can come back to. It's an emotional state that we can create. And really, after doing this practice properly, it's an emotional state that stays there the entire time. How we can make that a home base. So when we're in a stressful situation outside or outdoors, whether that's, in a social situation, if we have social anxiety, whether it's in a situation where we're in an interview and we have to perform, or maybe it's in a state where we have to do a test, like do exams, or any kind of stress-inducing activity, we want to be able to create and cultivate a home base, an emotional, internal home base that we feel safe, we feel secure, and we feel okay even when it's a situation where we're not the best. So tons of stuff has been done on this. There's like mind palaces, although that's more for memory. But at least when I was trying to, for my own journey, when I was trying to make it in jiu-jitsu, there's all these visualization exercises you can go into, mainly around becoming calm or becoming focused or becoming in flow. And it's a state which athletes can use. It's a state which high-achieving businessmen can use. It's a state which everyone can use, okay? But it is used at the top levels. Now, I think it's quite limited in how they use it, and I think it's quite fragile because this exercise that I'm about to give you is something which we put the hours in. So if you're just wanting a quick fix, this is not the video for you, and I'm definitely not the mentor for you, and this is definitely not the channel for you. This is not a quick fix. What it is a permanent and long-lasting personality change, deep personality change. Whereas a lot of the stuff that I've seen online, a lot of the stuff that I've seen other coaches teach is kind of a very mental framework, or it's very feeling-based. And the problem with these structures is they require us to go into a different state, like the state of hypnosis, which is what a lot of these state building practices are. And they're temporary. They don't bleed out into our day-to-day life. So a year from now, 6 months, 3 months, a year from now, we don't necessarily have to go into that state. That state is just who we are. So what you're going to be developing is a meditational state called metta. Metta is the Pali word or the Sanskrit word, which Sanskrit is the language in which all the Hindu and yogic texts are written in. Pali is the language that all of the Buddhist teachings are written in. So it's an ancient language and it means loving kindness. Now, I work mainly with guys, and a lot of guys get really scared when they hear loving kindness, partly because it's an emotional state which they've never really had to develop, or it's not really culturally encouraged for them to develop. But secondly, people mistakenly mistake kindness and compassion for being a pushover. This is not what this state is about, because the first thing you have to do is realize that you have to be compassionate and loving to yourself. So when you're in a situation where your boundaries are being crossed, it's not a loving thing to do or to be a doormat and let those boundaries be crossed because you're being nice to the other person. The first thing you would do if you were actually in a state of loving kindness, of unconditional love, is you would set that boundary. Hey, no, I'm not going to do that. No explanation needed at all. Absolutely zero explanation needed, because you're kind and loving to yourself primarily. And how are we going to develop this? Is through a practice which I learned from my mentor, Sister Kema, who was an enlightened Buddhist nun, and what her teacher's teacher, or what her teacher developed after spending about 20 years doing the breath meditation and the Vipassana meditation in Burma. Bhante Vimalaramsi is his name. He developed this practice by reading the suttas, which the Buddha learned, which are the Buddha's direct teachings. It's a meditation which they called TWIM, Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation. I will leave a link in the comments below, or not in the comments below, I will leave a link in the description box below, which has a direct link to their beginner instructions. But I'll set the scene for you right now. You have a spiritual friend, and you are going to radiate a feeling of love and metta to that spiritual friend. However, in order to get that feeling up first, you can close your eyes, you can do it right now, and you can think of maybe a baby or a puppy. One of my other mentors, Pierre, used to be able to feel a lot of metta for baby elephants for some reason, but he couldn't feel it for anything else to begin with. And if you can't feel it super strongly, that's totally fine. That's part of the practice. But you bring up an image where it's very easy to feel unconditional love for as best you can. And to help generate this feeling, you have the phrases, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you be loved. Okay? And you repeat that. The phrases are not important. They're just important to bring that state up for yourself. Now, in the meditation video that I'm going to link to you, we're going to do something a little bit different to what it says there. For the first 2 weeks, I got this from my friend Patrick, actually. You're going to radiate this feeling of metta, not to the spiritual friend. So the spiritual friend is a platonic friend who is going to be the object of that twin meditation where you're going to radiate metta towards. It's a great practice. However, for the first 1 or 2 weeks, what you guys are going to be doing is radiating that to yourself, because you want to be able to feel that state of metta for yourself, that state of unconditional love for yourself. I already pre-phrased it a little bit in this section, but the reason this is so, so powerful is if we embody this state of loving kindness in the way that it should be embodied, in the way that's true for it to be embodied, it means that boundaries get set effortlessly. You choose what's best for you effortlessly. Because you have your own back, you are not emotionally reactive anymore. Or if you are, it's very, very little, because the person that you rely on is yourself. So your systems of reliance, your systems of support are completely internally self-sustained. This makes you more grounded, more certain, more decisive. It gives you all of these cool traits without any danger of overcompensating. See, the thing that turns a lot of people off when it's just like, in normal day to day, is if people feel like you're overcompensating, because it's dishonest and it shows that you're not confident in yourself. So I know a lot of people that are watching this, or a lot of people, why they want to get into this is not just to feel good internally, but also so they can feel a little bit more authentically powerful in a really healthy way, so they can feel more authentically powerful and more at agency in the world overall. And this is a perfect way of helping to bring this in through state cultivation. So my mentor Pierre used to always talk about states into traits. Now he got this from the same person that Tony Robbins gets all his stuff from, which is Ken Wilber. Okay, I really recommend you to go and look him up. Ken Wilber is a really phenomenal figure, although you have to be careful when you're reading some of his stuff because sometimes he has a little bit of a shadow, at least from my perspective, of speaking from a place of intellectual arrogance. Very, very subtle. So just to be careful with that. However, the reason we are starting off with a state cultivation practice, and I'm going so in depth with you guys right now, is because if you stay in a state for long enough, you begin to adopt the traits that that state naturally has you in. So let's say if anyone's ever been drunk, and usually drunk, when you're drunk, alcohol is called liquid courage. Okay, it makes you more courageous. And the reason why is because we access a different state where we're not so self-conscious. The problem with being drunk is you're using alcohol to create this. You're using an external substance to create something internal. I'm not saying you shouldn't drink or you shouldn't have fun. Of course you should. Of course you can. But when we're in that state, we display characteristics that are more confident. However, when we do it sober and we stay in that state sober, we actually get to take some of those lessons and take some of those traits and experiences and ways of thinking into us. And that builds in a compound interest kind of a way that builds day by day. So if we're doing this practice every single day for 3 months, 6 months, a year onwards, every single day, every single month, we become more and more grounded in that experience. Imagine what results that would have for you. Because here's the other thing, when you're more confident, when you're more loving, and when you naturally have a way to set boundaries with it, which isn't overcompensating and doesn't seem defensive, people trust you a lot more. How do you think that would impact work, social life, anything to do with other people? And we haven't even got to the internal side of it, which is now we're building this home base and we can tap into this whenever we want. For instance, I've been doing this practice for years now. I'm constantly in a state of metta, of loving kindness. It constantly is flowing there. Even when I'm having a shadow crash or the stuff that isn't going the best, I always have access to that state to ground myself. It just naturally is there. I don't have to do anything now. But for you guys, if you're just starting, you will have to continue with that for a while or for a little bit in order to get to that state. Okay. So the reason why we're starting off with this is because we have an emotional home base, but also it states into traits where being in this state more and generating this state more when we are sober, we get to take elements of that more and more until this just becomes a natural part of our personality. This state of really, really strong positivity, unconditional love, and confidence that comes with this. So now we're going to be moving on to part two, which is, surprise, surprise, shadow work. So state cultivation is great. Having an emotional home base is great. Having that as a way to have not only emotional regulation, but also be able to, from a principle level, turn into a person with traits that are desirable, like confidence, like self-assuredness, like having compassion for ourselves, like all of those good things. State cultivation is amazing for all of that. However, we also need to deal with triggers that are coming up for us, with shadows that are still there, because you can be in this state, but you can still get triggered. You can go states into traits. However, if you have a subconscious block or an unconscious block around exhibiting a certain trait, like maybe you think being confident is actually being arrogant, that's a really classic one, then it will stop the osmosis process of states into traits. It will slow it to a real standstill, or you just won't develop it at all. Because if you have an internal judgment, if you have a shadow around being confident or living a life of freedom, or even living the life on your own terms and not doing what your family told you to do, or what the family business is, or whatever that is, then you're going to have a really hard time with having that process work smoothly. So shadow work is a way to help states into traits work smoothly. The states into traits also links perfectly with shadow work because it's much easier to do shadow work on ourselves when we're in a positive state of unconditional love. So they all link together. This is all part of the coaching system. And if this sounds really interesting to you, then I have my one-on-one link below where we can have a one-on-one chat, which is no hard sales, no hard selling. I just see where you are, what your goals are, if it's a good fit, if there's a good kind of personality fitting as well. There has to be good chemistry there. And then we can see what is the best option for you. Shadows are different to state cultivation because it can also be that it's not just an introjection. So an introjection would be a subconscious belief around confidence being arrogance. It gets more complex when we have to deal with parts work, which is split ego states essentially, which means there can be a whole section of our personality trapped at a lower stage, and whenever we do something that's related to that lower stage, we have to live through that, which is obviously not ideal because it means that we lose a lot of our maturity. And when we lose a lot of our maturity, we lose a lot of our flexibility, our options, our openness. And also, no one here would choose to be 10 years younger when it comes to intellect because we just don't have the life experience and we don't have the resources to make the best decisions than we do now unless we've been through a massive shadow crash. It's the same way with parts. If we're living for a part which is trapped at a stage 5 years, 10 years before, then we're going to be making all of those mistakes as well. Okay. It's obviously not so black and white. It's not so cut and dry, but that's a general principle. That's a general rule. So we need to go in and heal and integrate those parts in order so we have access to all of our maturity all of the time. Okay. And this is how you become grounded in your own validation. Because as people get older, it's such a trope, but it's true. When people get older, they just care less about what other people think because they have more experience. They know themselves much better. And when you're mature, the definition of maturity is being able to take life as it comes and goes. Okay, so we want to maximize that as much as we can. So when it comes to shadow work, there's three main distinctions you need to know. I talk about it all the time on this channel. Interjections are subconscious beliefs that are holding us back. Projections are the same, subconscious beliefs that are holding us back. But instead of taking that as an internal judgment about ourselves, we are not aware, so we project that onto others. So an example of this would be in the confidence issue is we can project onto others if they're being confident that they are actually being arrogant, when really that's our internal system. But because we don't like the fact that maybe there's a block around our confidence, we just see every single sign of confidence as arrogance. And then you can turn this into golden shadows and dark shadows, and then there's complementary projections and matching projections, and there's this whole other complex stuff. Okay, but right now we're going to stick to the basics. And the third one is, and the most complex one is split ego states. And for those, we have to reintegrate. So for projections, we have to re-own them. We have to say, oh no, that's not them being arrogant, that's just my judgment. For introjections, we have to let them go and release them. I have a ton of content on this, guys, if you're interested in, for free as well. So you can go ahead and check that out on my playlists. Practical Guide to Shadow Work is the main one I'm referencing. And then for, like I said, split ego states, it's a reintegration process where we have to reintegrate that part and either take away the responsibility that it's holding on to and let ourselves hold on to that. Or maybe it needs to grow up, or it could just stay how it is and it just does something different that's suited to the stage that it is at. But this is so, so crucial because also emotional triggers and shadows are the main way that if we are around some people that are maybe morally dubious, it's the main way that they can leverage us to do things that we don't want. So obviously that's the opposite of being grounded in your own validation and experience of life. So we want to make sure that these triggers and these kind of vulnerability spots, we want to make sure those are at an absolute minimum. Because if we are in a stable emotional state with a good home base, and even without that home base, we're still very mature, we're able to show up to whatever the world throws at us pretty much, then that makes us such a grounded, confident, self-assured person, which has massive impacts in the external world because you're just seen as more trustworthy, you're seen as more capable, you're seen as more competent. It makes you more likable as well, because if you're not getting triggered at people and shouting at people, then of course people are going to like you more. So this leads in to the third section, which is integrating a polarity-based or a relaxation exercise. So this is inspired by my mentor, Pierre, calls it the 7 levels of relaxation. That's his stuff, so I'm not going to share it fully with you guys for free content because it's not my stuff to share. But there's a way that we can use his concepts, his ideas which allows us to use super essential part of the hypnotic loop, which I have a whole video series on as well. So it allows us to use one of the real key areas that we have at our disposal, which is our physiology. It's very hard for us to be triggered, for us to not be grounded, for us to be in a very ungrounded state when our body is relaxed. So basic Dharma theory, mind and body are the same. They're just an extension of mind. So if we can use that as a way to get into our mind, because sometimes it's hard to access the mind. Sometimes it's hard to just calm the mind. What we can do is calm the body. So we can just do a simple Vipassana body scan. You can do it with me now, where we feel we have the focus up here on the top of our skull, and then we just body scan our awareness and our feeling all the way down to our feet. And once we get to our feet, we just come back here and we keep on body scanning. And with each body scan or with each breath, you are relaxing even more into your body. It's very, very simple. You can do this as a 15-minute practice, or you can do it when socializing with people. You can do it whenever you need to, whenever there's an experience of life which is a little bit tough for you, a little bit trying for you. This is something you can go back to, because we can have an emotional home base. We can cultivate the state of metta, we can go work for our shadows. But if we just had such a big experience of life of being a little bit tense, holding tension in our body, then we do need a third practice to really put the training wheels on. A bit like when we ride bikes when we're a child, we need those training wheels on either side. This is a foolproof, fail-safe way to make sure that we are utilizing, to make sure that we are really transitioning into a new, real personality change. And we're not just skipping the body, which a lot of practices do. They skip the body, they skip the somatic releases. So you can do it as a Vipassana exercise, and you'll see that there's different areas in your body which hold more and more tension. And with those, you can experiment and play around with this, guys. Remember, just take the principles and then see how that works for you with just relaxing those centers. And over time, guys, it's not an infinite practice. The same with metta, the same with shadow work. They are not infinite practices. The problems that you're experiencing do go away. Now, they also make space for new problems to arise, don't get me wrong, but the problems that you're working with right now, they're not just something you're stuck with. The tension in your body is not just something you're stuck with enough repetition, with the right shadow work, with the right guidance. And again, guys, if this is something that's interesting to you, I have my one-on-one link below where we can go really into depth and see what it is exactly that you need and have a real bespoke, tailored game plan for you. First call is free, although it's just a discovery call, it's not a coaching call. If that's interesting, like I said, I have the link below. But if you're doing all of that kind of stuff, then of course you're going to be much more grounded in your own validation and experience of life. Of course you're going to be that emotional rock, that emotional anchor for yourself, because how could you not be? If you're grounded, if you're relaxed, if you're loving with yourself, if you're setting boundaries, if you're confident, if you no longer have shadows arising, no longer have shadow crashes, then what is left for you other than to completely change the reality that you're living? Guys, I hope that was interesting. I hope that was fun. If you have any comments or questions, let me know in the comments and I will get back to you. And if not, I'll see you on the next video.